We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to WunderGraph launch week. Today, we have a very special AMA with Uri Goldshtein. Uri, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. For those of you that don't know Uri, Uri is the CEO and founder of the Guild. He is also a GraphQL TSC and GraphQL Foundation member. As co-founder and CEO of the Guild is the largest open source group in the GraphQL ecosystem. If you've used the GraphQL tooling, you have most likely used the Guild's tools. They have open source libraries such as Yoga Server, GraphQL Mesh, GraphQL Code Generator. And honestly, this episode isn't long enough to even talk about all the tools that they've contributed to. So Uri, thank you again so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm loving your work as well. We've been talking for many years with Jens, and everything you're doing is really exciting. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you.
By the way, there's renovation in my bathroom, so if there's like some noise and stuff, I'm sorry.
You're fine. I love the green screen in the back though, so it looks good.
Yeah, that's not planned. It's just green for whatever. Yeah, it's just
what is that behind you? Can you go to the side? There's something.
Yeah. Oh, there's This is my guitar gear. This is
nice.
It's like, there's an amp. Usually people buy a full amp it's like built in with the preamp, a power amp, and a speakers. So I separated it. So this is a thing that actually is very,
what did you plan
very
to
rare.
play today?
I have my guitar here, and I have there's a bunch of stuff. I used to be a musician. I used to be a guitar teacher, and I performed live around the world with some bands. Yeah, and somehow I ended up as a developer. So yeah, so I still keep those things around, but I'm playing much less than I should. So
I think
I always say I should go back more on. So
I think there was a podcast where you talked about being a musician and somehow you went into open source development or something. I'm not sure I remember it correctly.
Yeah, it's somehow it took me a while to agree that with myself that I'm also a developer. I always said I'm a musician, but I'm doing development for practicalities and stuff. And then when I found open source, I think I actually found what I really love about development, software development. And then I was like, okay, I did the switch of how I'm first and foremost a developer, and then later a musician. But it took many years, and it was hard for me psychologically to give up on that title. But yeah, I still play, and I still think I'm good. So yeah.
That's amazing. You might have to bring the guitar, give you a guitar at GraphQL Conf next week. I would definitely like to see you jam out. But speaking of that,
the fact that I'm flying to San Francisco, I actually ordered this keyboard, special keyboard. It's called Rolly. It's it's like a MIDI keyboard, but it's very unique. So you can only get it in the US. So yeah, so actually I'm gonna get it there in the hotel. So maybe I'll demonstrate some stuff.
Perfect. Okay, love that. And so before, after the band and when you started transition, so you started off your career working for large enterprises as a software developer and a tech lead. So walk us through your background and how you transitioned from, being a rock star and a musician and a teacher to an open source developer and then to working for some of the largest enterprises across Europe.
I think so. Yeah, I started. I won't specify too much, but I was kind of forced into becoming into that work initially as a software developer. I went to a course and they taught me, basic development, and then I went to this place, and it was let's call it the most extreme enterprise environment that you can think of, very hierarchical, and there's rules, and every time you need to at that time weren't even connected to the internet, so we had the MSDN from Microsoft, and you couldn't Google your issues, you had to figure it out, and it was nice, and I learned, and I was very dumb back then, but I was in a good team, and I learned a lot of stuff, and I stayed there for 7 years. And then after that, I joined a startup, which was a very different thing, very different environment, where then I got exposed to open source and to the web, and I had to build like the first website, and I built it in Angular, which back then wasn't popular. Like it was very few people used Angular, and that actually like gave me an advantage, because as Angular grew, I was like, could be an expert in it, even though I wasn't like, an amazing developer. So I even got to talk, my first talk, the first talk that I gave was about Angular at Google Tel Aviv. And nobody in Google Tel Aviv knew what Angular was. It was nice. And then I got used to open source, and my CTO back then, we used PHP, and he used like oh, sorry if there's noise. Can you still hear me, or it's like crazy?
We hear you. You have some noise canceling. It's okay.
Oh, it's canceling the noise. That's really cool.
Yep.
So anyway, then we used PHP, a framework, and we used a library called Doctrine. It's like an ORM, and he found an issue there. So he recorded an issue, and then later he found that like he could. He told me a couple of days passed, and then he told me, "Hey, I think I found what the issue is," and I fixed it. And I was like, okay, that's pretty crazy, because I used to come from like, .NET and Microsoft environments. And the fact that you can like tinker with the actual code of the thing you're using was like mind blowing to me. And then 3 months later, he came back and he's like, oh, they merged my PR. And since this moment, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, I can't believe it. Like, yeah. So anyway, then there were many stages afterwards, but then at this point I realized like open source is just the coolest thing ever, and that was it. And later on, I went more and more deep into open source, and then I joined the Meteor development group that was like a Meteor.js, the framework, and then Meteor.js turned into Apollo GraphQL. So I was part of that team. Apollo was supposed to be Meteor 2.0, basically. And then after a while, I realized that like there's some structures, like the structure. I wanted to build something that is more accustomed to open source, to building like specifically to open source, the structure that is like more free. So that's how I came up with the guild. I left Apollo and started the guild, and yeah, that's the short version of the history, I guess.
Is the guild a company? Is it a group? Does it have a CEO? Like, is it? What actually is the guild?
So it's a good question, and the answer I think changes every day. It started not like there were for all kinds of versions of the guild. Like this is like I think the best version so far, but like it started at the beginning. It was like a commune of freelancers. Like I wanted to build like this community of freelancers that work together, and I thought like, what's hard about being a freelancer? Like, first of all, finding clients, and second of all, feeling lonely, and the third thing is taxes. Like it's like there's so much crap with taxes. So I thought if we'll come as a group, then we can help each other with those things. And that was okay, but again, for me, the biggest thing always was open source. So the current version of the guild is like basically just everything is around open source. It's a company because it's easier for us than to interact with like other companies and to build products and to close contracts and everything like that. But the main goal is just, but we're a weird company because like we didn't raise money. We didn't want to raise money. And also everything we do is open source, completely, including our products, which I think is a bit unique. Like Hive is our SaaS product and it's MIT open source. So basically like, WunderGraph can take Hive and like call it something WunderGraph plus and put it under your name and sell it, and it will be fine. It will really be completely fine. And it's because of what we believe in. So
Why
so
would
maybe,
anybody do this? This is crazy.
Because it depends what your goals are, right? If you want to be a successful millionaire and put your name on TechCrunch, maybe it's not going to work for you. But if you want to create like solutions that will be there for the long term, then I think, I mean, we're trying shit out, but then it looks like it's working, you know, like the guild has been around for many, many years. We've been developing our libraries consistently, weekly or daily for 8 years, maybe even more, some of those libraries. And it's, you know, it's amazing. For me, it was amazing how rare it is. Like so many libraries out there are like, you know, they're being developed and after 3 months or a year or 2 years, they're being deserted. So yeah, so for that type of thing, if and that was our original goal, I think it works, you know, like if, for example, everyone is like afraid of like when they build SaaS products that are open source, that like Amazon will take their stuff and then copy it and run it themselves and build a product around it. And if it will happen to us, like if Amazon will take Hive and run it, like we'll be super happy, you know, like it just means that, you know, more people would use our stuff and probably would come for us for questions. And yeah, and luckily I think we're also now, I mean, it took many, many years, but we're now in a very strong position also, you know, financially. So it's like, I guess we're in a unique position now because it's like we got to, let's call it financial success, but without investors. So we even invested in some companies, even in our ecosystem. So it's unique, and it gives us a lot of freedom to just focus on the let's call it the boring day-to-day stuff. You know, like just answering issues and creating, helping people creating PRs. Now, in the last month or two, maybe people saw that we did it a bit less because we're working very hard on GraphQL Conf next week. But after that, we're just gonna go back to the same boring stuff every day, going through issues, cleaning up stuff, and I don't know. That's what we like.
You know, in the last couple of weeks and months, we have seen various stories around open source and companies moving from open source to BSL licenses, HashiCorp, all these kinds of stories. How? Like a lot of people will probably ask, how can you build a successful company based on open source? Like what's the strategy? What's the mindset behind the guild? How did you achieve that?
I think it depends on your definition of success first, right? I think everyone has this, like, if we go look at the startup world and like the tech world in the recent years, I think there's this like conventional way of like what is a success. So you start, you know, you're a developer or whatever, you have an idea, and then you build something like an MVP, or maybe you create some slides, and then you know, the first thing you do is to raise money. And for many, many people, that was a success, right? If they managed to raise X amount of money, they're going to be in the newspapers, like, oh, great, you know, they raised this and this amount. And then you're fighting off to the next round, until I guess the success is like, or a company buys you up, or you go public, which, I mean, that's okay. That's a great thing to do, but I don't think that's the only definition of success. At least not for me, because in all those cases, like, it's like, for me, I just wanted to be free to build open source. So, and in all those cases, like, let's say if I raised money, immediately I become kind of like, let's call it I'm not an employee, but kind of I'm dependent on my investors. So it's like I bought myself a boss. And that's exactly what I didn't want to do. So that's one thing about the, you know, investments and stuff. And second of all, when you, let's say, you know, you got to the great dream of like creating a public company, then there's a question of like, what is a public company good or not, right? Like, it's like now you're becoming a politician, because let's say if you want to decide something, your shareholders are the public. And some people think the public is smart, and sometimes it's not. Like, and if you're, so for me, success was just maybe a bit of a more modest goal, which was just let me work on the thing that I want to work in and have enough money to buy bread for my family, something like that. And it's and for me that was a success. So I think it's just a different definition. So that means that like if we're not controlling the whole market, or we're gonna like, then it's not, for some people it will be a failure. For me it's still a success. So I guess that's the core of it. What do you define as success? And I think we see so many like the definition of success became the same between different startups. And now of course in the environment it's getting even harder, with like money, with the interest rates going up, and like people suddenly there's less money going around. But yeah, I don't know, I thought that just open source is so powerful that like there's an issue and I can solve it, or not even solve it, I can work on it, try something and show it to the public, and then it might work, and if not, someone will tell me I'm stupid, and maybe someone will teach me, and maybe will just tell me I'm stupid. So so just keeping that alive was the success of it. And I think you mentioned like those differences in like licenses. I think these companies, they did those changes. I think there were just their whole model was like to be dominant on everything. So now, like if they're not dominant, there's an issue. And now if they're not dominant and the market is down and they can't raise money, they're in a really big problem. So they have to defend themselves. And my guess is that like we're going to see actually this happening more and more. And I actually think that for the smaller players, it's a good thing, because it means that the larger players are just accumulated so much, costs and people, and like they're being built for world domination. So if there's no world domination, the runway is short. So for us now, it's fine. Like we can, we have all the time in the world. So I think our advantage is time.
I love that, Uri. And we have a question from the audience. So I love your philosophy, Uri, but where does the income for the company come? Sponsorships, consulting, the SaaS, and do all the maintainers get rewarded?
So yes to everything. So first of all, and it changes all the time, right? Like we're just figuring out. So first of all, yes, the idea was, everyone from all the members of the guild, like our role, we had a lot of people coming in and asking to join the guild, because now, we're a famous group and we do fun stuff in the day-to-day. But like the thing is, we decided a long time ago that we're only going to hire people that did open source by themselves before joining the guild, and without getting paid for it before. So people that actually were, enthusiastic enough to do open source, spend their time, sometimes even against their boss's wishes, like, after hours, to do open source. And we thought, well, if we do get income from all those various areas, we want to put it with people that are actually, that will sustain open source, and with people that actually did it even without the money. So all of the members of the guild came like that. Like we saw their work on open source, and we used work on open source. And then and then we reach out and we say, hey, you want to join the guild? So we don't have like job interviews or anything like that. We just reach out to specific people. And yeah, so all of the people in the guild are getting paid fully to do open source. And about the question of like how we get money, like the answer is yes for everything, because we're figuring it out. Like we did consulting at the beginning, which was very nice because we worked with clients and then we found their issues. So we brought back to open source, and then the open source became better. So we found more clients, we got more feedback from them. That feedback for the open source was this cycle. And then after a while, we thought like, hey, what does startups do that we don't do? So we just said, they do SaaS business, so let's try to do it, and we also said, like, everything we do is open source, so why won't we just open source our SaaS and see what's going on? And we did that, and Hive became like more successful than we ever imagined. Like, it's crazy, and it's also like a fascinating engineering challenge, because it's like crazy scale. Like, we save so many schemas from so many companies and traffic from so many companies. It's Camille from the guild is like the lead of Hive, and basically done so much work in like hardcore performance engineering and like data gathering and like, and so we did never expect Hive to be so successful that it is today. So and we have now, and it's cool because we have Hive as a SaaS business that is very successful, and then we have, which is another source of revenue that we never expected to have, and then we have people using Hive self-hosted, which is another source both for like contributions from like people in large companies, and also maybe consulting, and maybe just like learning from them, learning from large companies how they use the product and how we can improve.
Love that. And so the guild is really a guild, and the guild will reach out to you guys. There is no joining
The guild will reach you.
Well, they will only reach you if you contribute to open source by yourself. So if you guys want to get involved in the guild, come contribute to open source. Amazing. I love
that. And that's why it's also, we think this is a message that hopefully will get more people to do open source, because there's this whole like Twitter drama or X drama about like, people that are maintainers, famous maintainers, and then going and they're ranting about like people are like, they're not super happy with their contributions, or they have demands on the open source. And I can understand that, but also like I'm not specific, like personally, I'm not doing open source for like getting praises from anyone. So if I don't get the praises, I don't care. So it's for me, this drama is a bit like showing people why open source is so hard, and why open source is like not for grateful. People are not grateful for open source, and I'm like, no, open source is very easy. It's there. You can look at the code of the smartest people out there. You can just look at what they do daily and how they code daily, and see that they're not that smart, and then just join. And it's and it opens like all the doors for you. So I think it's also like a bit of this Twitter drama about how hard it is open source. I think it's come from people who are like, I don't know, maybe it was easy for them, they've been there for a while, or it was easy for them to get, great jobs, so they never thought about all the opportunities that open source can give you. So and maybe, if the world didn't like praise and like, told them they're the best people in the world just because they contributed something or created a library, I mean, it's fine. Like, I don't know.
It's an interesting point. I mean, but also it's Twitter, where anything, drama will get more upvotes rather than the silent guy who's contributing to open source and doesn't want to make a name for himself. But I love that. And so
I'm still trying to figure out Twitter stuff. Like, I think Jens, you're like tweeting, you're good at like drama. I'm still trying to get to your level.
At what?
At Twitter drama.
Twitter drama. Yeah, I recently tried to get a bit better at it and not create so much drama. But I also changed I changed my Twitter handle, and I'm trying out a new theme. Like my new Twitter handle is the worst founder, and the idea behind that, some people laugh about it, but there's an idea behind this. The idea is very simple. I want to share a perspective. I think there's a kind of founder stigma that as a founder, you have to be perfect. You have to be right. You have to have a vision. You have to always be right. You shouldn't create drama. You shouldn't tweet with Theo, all these kind of things. And you know what? The reality is, as a founder, sometimes you struggle. Sometimes you might be depressed because something doesn't work. And one of my core values, and my team knows this, is I want to be honest. Like for me, it is very hard to play. Like I don't want to play nice or play good mood. When I'm in a bad mood, I'm in a bad mood, man. And the idea behind the worst founder is I want to tweet just from my head when something goes wrong or when I did a learning. I don't want to tell people what is right because I don't know what is right, but I can tell you from my past and experience, where did I go wrong? What are my fails? And my Twitter account is just, it's just a backlog of, or a log file of my learnings. And I try to share just honest things where I fucked up, and maybe you can take something from it.
I think it's really cool. I think, it's kind of like also in the spirit of open source. And, I mean, you guys are like building like really everything. You're also like an open source company, like building everything on open source. Like, you're really leading like, in that area as well. And having a look into your internal struggles, I think is great. I think it's a good lesson. It's like, again, like there's this theory I call the bullshit theory. Like everything before you know it sounds very sophisticated and amazing, and then once you're actually doing it, you're there, you see it's just bullshit. And that's why like doing stuff before you're doing something, you're afraid, you think you're not enough, and I think your profile is like this philosophy that you just said is really cool because it can show people like, yeah, you're just figuring it out. Like I'm just figuring it out, and we're all here just figuring it out. So there's no like crazy smart people out there or geniuses or anything. Like we're just all figuring it out. And the people that just are continuing to struggle for the longest are the winners, maybe. So.
I love that. Very well said. And I can totally agree. You meet someone who's super uber successful, and when you sit down and talk with them, you're like, is it just a regular guy or woman? Like, what was it? And it was just perseverance. And, it was every time something went down, they just kept going. So I love that. And I definitely see the similarities between, open source, the guild, and WunderGraph, and all three having those characteristics. So love that. Yesterday, though, we announced, actually, let's backtrack. 2 to 3 weeks ago, we announced GraphQL Fusion. Yesterday, we announced Open Federation. Uri, let's talk about GraphQL Fusion. Introduce it, talk to me about it, and then from there, we can transition into Open Federation.
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, like the main team and people behind Fusion are the Chili Cream team. I think they're amazing. We kind of like sometimes see them as like the sister guild, because they're in the .NET world, but they're like very similar, and they're really cool people. And like I think a year ago or something like that, we met them at API Days in Paris. We sat for lunch, and it was really fun, and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that came up was that it's obvious, like GraphQL, when it's like we have. The reason the ecosystem is flourishing now is because of open source, and because the Facebook agreed to open source their spec and even some solutions around it. And with time, I think what Apollo did very well was to identify that there's a new area of like architecture that is like missing and is very, very, and it actually solves like real problems. And they build like stitching and then federation around it. I'll just say that like there's a lot of misconceptions on stitching. So everyone who thinks that stitching is like, we'll get to that in a second. But like stitching is now a superset of federation, just for everyone who's like thinking that federation is better than stitching somehow. So no, but so they come with Apollo Federation, and it helped and touched a lot of. It solved a lot of things for a lot of companies. But I think that area was like, first of all, it's very hard to contribute to it. And also, we and some other companies also identified that if we just look at the problem and not currently at the solution, we can solve it in so much better ways than how it's being solved today. Like the same problem that Apollo Federation is being solved, we can solve it in better ways and improve upon. So what we thought was, what if we'll just look at the plain problem and the plain use cases and rethink everything? And also we would put that solution, so how that solution would look like, and that's Fusion. Fusion is basically like a spec around the general problem of, let's call it remote execution. Like if you have multiple GraphQL APIs that are merged somehow into one, and not at build step, but on like at runtime. So it's kind of like a fresh look with everything we learned and creating a spec around it. So it's the best version of how we see it's for us. It's like the best way to solve this issue. So that's Fusion, and it's really exciting because a lot of companies have joined this effort, and it's going to be also Chili Cream is leading that effort, and they also were very generous to actually contribute that under the GraphQL Foundation, which is extremely generous and extremely great, because that means that no single company actually controls it. Like, and so many companies have joined, like, you know, Amazon and AppSync from Amazon, and you guys, and IBM, and like I'm missing a lot of companies, but it was pretty crazy, like how many companies have joined this effort. So so that's Fusion, and now there's like Chili Cream is leading the way with like their own implementation with hot chocolate, but many other companies are now implementing that spec in other languages, like, you know, in JavaScript and Rust and many things like that, and Go. And so this is really, really exciting. I do think that in the current, so that's Fusion. And we're going to talk also more about it in GraphQL Conf, like officially announce it and those things. Now, so that's Fusion, but the thing is, we have the existing solutions and the existing ecosystem. Like Apollo Federation is very dominant today. It's very popular, very dominant. On the other hand, there's so many companies that are feeling uneasy with, you know, the changes of the license and pricing and like many things that has happened in the last couple of months. So they're looking for alternatives. Like, you know, every time you know, if you're a good architect and like you're choosing a solution and you see that the solution means that you can't move to another solution, that makes it hard for you to move to another solution, you know you're in a problem. And that's why I think a lot of people in the ecosystem today are feeling uneasy with the current path. On the other hand, you know, they already are using Federation, and Federation is good enough, let's say. But they want to be able to easily migrate in case they want. And I think what you guys are doing with like Open Federation is really, really exciting. I see that as like, let's take this, you know, Apollo Federation, like, and how people are using it. Let's try to first of all figure out what it is, because Apollo is not sharing too much. And again, like, it's not so easy to create. They're making it very easy to create subgraph alternatives, but not supergraph. So for good reason, it's not good for their business. So this is like a combination of people, like a group of people that are basically working on how to easily migrate from this. You know, so you can basically seamlessly transition to you can just drop in, replace your gateway. Let's say you have, I don't know, 4 Apollo subgraphs, and now you're using Apollo router, and let's say you use Apollo Studio. You want to basically seamlessly just replace each point in this architecture. You want to just replace with another thing. And of course, for Apollo, they want to actually turn everything together, but they want, you know, to vendor lock you in. And this initiative is like is to basically help people to not do that. And, you know, I think you already have a solution that is a drop-in replacement. We also have, and I think what we just and there's others as well. So today, you know, there are alternatives both for the gateway and the schema registry and the subgraphs. So you can just pick and choose whatever you want. You can do everything Apollo, but just one piece WunderGraph, or the other way around. So I think it's great that all of us are basically collaborating to create a spec to make it not only true for now, but also true for the future. Like let's say Apollo is now gonna, because what Apollo is probably gonna do is gonna change their spec, so it will be harder for people to follow. But that's okay, because first of all, we're building stuff really, really quickly, and we'll always follow. And also we have Fusion, which is the actual future of how all of these things would look like. So I think for me, the combination of those two projects is basically opening up the last, let's call it semi-closed space in the GraphQL ecosystem. And I think just opening up the space is so profound that it will change completely how GraphQL is being used and where. Like, because part of the Fusion spec is also stuff that you are doing and we are doing in terms of like taking open API specs or SOAP APIs or all kinds of other API protocols and be able to use GraphQL there. Also, Hazura is contributing their like data spec into it as well, which is another very exciting thing. So it's kind of like for, GraphQL could do so much more. And there's a lot of talk in Twitter about how GraphQL is good for this specific thing, but it's not good for that. My opinion is that with these changes and all of us and all the companies involved going behind these changes, that is going to open up the GraphQL market to like a whole new area. Like this is going to be like, I don't know, like a renaissance of GraphQL. And this is why I'm so excited about it. So first of all, thank you for doing it. Like, you're leading the way with Open Federation. It's a great and very important initiative. You're also building like crazy fast gateway that like supports all of those. So, and congratulations on Cosmos. Like it's really, really exciting. So yeah, I think we're at the really start of a new area and a new dawn for GraphQL, thanks to your efforts.
I really appreciate it. I need to add a couple of things because I think it's super important. So Open Federation, there's a couple of things that I think we need to talk about that. So first of all, if you look at if you search for Federation spec, what you find is you go quite fast to the documentation of Apollo. And when we started implementing not subgraphs, but the router or the gateway, and I started with the gateway many years ago because I was like, if you know me, I maintain a project that's called GraphQL Go Tools, and 5 years ago I started that because I always had the idea of building an engine that can combine all APIs you have. It was always like a nerd dream of me, I always wanted to build a tool that brings together all the APIs you have. And so about Open Federation, one thing there is, you really just have this subgraph spec. So you have these directives and nobody has a clue what they do. There are composition checks in Rover, but where are the rules? We don't know. Like, so we had to reverse engineer and figure out and read every piece of code we could find on the internet and try to understand when is something composable. And to our surprise, we even found situations where the Apollo tooling says it's composable, but our test suite knew it's not composable. So the Apollo gateway at runtime would throw an error and we knew it's not composable. And the problem here is, if you look at the GraphQL spec, and this is the power of an open specification, there are rules when two selection sets can merge. It is defined in a plain English so that people can understand it. For GraphQL, for Federation, we don't have it. We have no clue. So that's one piece. Another piece is, and I will do a conference talk next week at GraphQL Conf. It's called Data Loader 3.0. But the talk is actually about 5 years of experience in building GraphQL API gateways and the evolution of the data loader pattern, at least from my perspective, because I had different learning steps how to actually load data in distributed systems, especially with GraphQL, because if you have nested trees of data with lists and nested lists, it gets extremely complex to do that in a fast and efficient way. Like, it's solvable, but it will very easily be extremely slow and resource intense. And it took me 5 years to really understand the problem. And I still think I'm not 100% there. There's still room for improvement. So again, there's no defined rules for how should a router actually work. And my first effort is with this conference talk, and I also write a book. It's called GraphQL-API-gateway.com. I write this book because I want to share the knowledge how to write in GraphQL API gateway, because that's actually, like, it's hard. Like, I did it a couple of years for Tyke Technologies. Now I do it for WunderGraph. Before Tyke, by the way, going on a tangent, I started building GraphQL Go tools, and then I wrote to Tyke, "Hey Tyke, your API gateway is written in Go. I have this library written in Go. Let me work for you. I bring GraphQL to Tyke." And I did, and they gave me a job, and there was no real job application. And then I built a whole team of people building GraphQL things at Tyke. So through open source, I got a job, and that was, I don't know, that showed me you can build a career on top of open source, you know? So we need a specification. How should a router work? How should composition work? How should we actually load data? So join me next week if you're interested in learning how we load data. And what else did I want to say? Open Federation. Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, like, first of all, about just a small point. You said, like, you know, that you just build the thing on open source and then you just found out a work with it. And I think, you know, many times people are just, they're thinking there's a reason not to do what they want to do. Like, they're afraid to do the thing. And then if you just do the thing that you want to do, like, you will find work and you will find stuff. Like, it's just, and open source is so much like that. I really believe in that. Like, if you have an idea in your head, and even if 100 people did that idea before you, just build it anyway. Like, you'll find a thing. I think about what you said is, like, I think that everyone who started or heard about GraphQL at the beginning got extremely excited. And somehow, because there was this, GraphQL brings on this, like, crazy idea of all the things that suddenly you can do with, like, data and schemas and graphs and, like, you know, distributed execution, and, like, everyone has their own dream about GraphQL. And then with time, for many reasons, it kind of, like, died down, you know? And I think what you're saying, like, what you're doing and saying, and also the stuff that we are doing and everything that's happening in the last couple of months, and I think, you know, a lot of those things will be announced in GraphQL Conf, is, like, we're bringing back, we're unblocking all these crazy ideas. That's the real value here. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I follow you, you know, for, like, WunderGraph blog for years, and in the WunderGraph blog, you know, you wrote a lot of crazy ideas that, you know, I also had, and some of them I didn't have, and I think the problem is that the community is kind of, like, locked behind all kinds of, like, stuff that are just moving slow, and that's why also, like, GraphQL felt like enterprisey, but GraphQL is enterprisey, but also extremely interesting and also extremely fast if you just build the right things. And what I'm really, the reason I'm really excited about both your, you know, launch week and GraphQL Conf next week is there's so much stuff that are now coming out that are unblocking everything. Like, just with you open sourcing and figuring out how to execute super graphs in general, and then we also in Hive we figure out how to do all those compositions. Like we need to compose. We have the most in Hive. We have the most Apollo Federation schemas in the world, outside of Apollo probably. So like we have so many cases of working with Apollo Federation and finding all those quirks that, like you see, like that everyone has bugs, also Apollo and also us. So sharing those and having an open spec is a given. But then once we solve all those issues, we make GraphQL extremely easy to use. There's all these new areas that like we can now tackle. Like we can build like I'll just give one example. We have two new front-end frameworks going to be announced in GraphQL, which both of them are looking completely differently about like GraphQL, because now everyone is looking at GraphQL as like this boring thing that is good for like very big app, and there's Isograph and Houdini. So both of those are extremely exciting, because with those things, like you could build an app super quickly, way faster, in my opinion, than like TRPC or other alternative. And it really brings for me the dream that I always had about how GraphQL could be. But it's only because we were kind of like unblocking all these people. It always used to be like, Apollo client, relay, that's it. And then, Urkel came, and we, for a very long while, we used Urkel together with the Cogent to bring ideas from relay. But now there's more players in the ecosystem, and I don't know, I'm really excited about it. And I think and the same goes for like composing and composition. Like, if we take all your work about composing schemas and, distributing APIs everywhere, and then, using, ideas from GraphQL Mesh, where you can like take any API and turn it into a GraphQL representation and query it with GraphQL. Can we get to a world where like we can query any API in the world, and like, kind of like, I think this is your idea also in the blog post about like an NPM for APIs, or the semantic web, right? That's the dream, right? Let's get like all the APIs in the world that we can query, and then build automatic applications on it. And we have AI now, so we can just expose all those APIs in a certain way, and the user can just ask something, and then we maybe automatically build screens for that user based on the data that is exposed in the schema. And GraphQL is the perfect technology for it, because it's the most expressive language to do that, right? Like you have a schema that explains the most of it, and then as a consumer, you have a query. Like it's way more expressive than any other API technology. So yeah, so we have so much to grow into, to the open API world, and yeah. Okay, so now I
love this, and I can add 2-3 words, because you picked up a point I wanted to make earlier. So 5 years ago, I started with GraphQL because I thought, okay, that's the language to compose APIs in something. And over time, for me, this idea grew of, and you just mentioned it, the NPM for APIs. There's a lot of sorry, but there's a lot of stupid people on Twitter. The worst founder can say something like this. There's a lot of stupid people on Twitter that are like, yeah, TRPC is better than this, REST is better than that, hypermedia, HTMX, blah, blah, blah. The point of GraphQL, if you look through all that bullshit, the point of GraphQL is it's not perfect. It's not the best tool. There's other things that might do some things better, and it's not ideal for every problem. But if we can actually make everything GraphQL, if Hasura can make databases GraphQL, if GraphBase can make creating APIs super easy, if the guild with Mesh can make any SOAP and whatnot thing GraphQL, if we all build
Yep.
tools that in the middle meet at GraphQL, and it will become
Yes.
all somehow compatible, what kind of world can we create? And for me, one
Yep.
thing I was thinking a lot lately is, I think what Federation or what Apollo is doing, I think Federation as an idea or composed APIs as an idea is at 0.1% of the potential it could have. What if Federation was almost free? What if API composition is almost free? What if more people would, through that, adopt GraphQL? More players like Hasura, GraphBase, and all the others mesh, build connectors. What if we create this whole world of things and they can all talk to each other? GraphQL is very expressive. We see OpenAI agents that they can look at GraphQL schemas, they can look at the description, they can figure out things themselves. What can all of this unlock? And then, there's this question of why are we making Cosmo? Why do we make this open source? Because I believe if we want to build the foundation of composing distributed APIs, nobody will ever trust closed source tools. I have the dream of building, and whatever shape that is in the end, but I have the dream of building the GitHub for APIs. And if you look at GitHub, it's built on top of Git, and Git is open source and everybody trusts it and everybody has it installed. And like for me, I don't know, but GraphQL is the Git, but for data. And we can build open platforms together. And Git servers, they are compatible. There's a protocol. And this could be Fusion. Fusion could be that protocol. And
exactly.
I don't know. And the point is, for a VC pitch, imagine the current adoption of Federation is 0.1% of the market. Even if we just serve a fraction of the 100%, and we are a successful player in this market, and we supply very good GraphQL tooling, first of all, there will be healthy competition. People like Hive and Chili and others can make money. The market will be so infinitely big that there's no problem to have multiple players. And if we are currently at 0.1% of the potential, because who's using GraphQL? Almost nobody. Like most API traffic is not GraphQL. So if we can transition that, I don't know, market size infinitely.
I agree. I mean, I think also it doesn't matter if it's GraphQL or not. Like, I don't care if you expose your APIs as whatever. It's SOAP, right? If you expose the APIs, the question is, how can we, then consume it in an easy way and then combine it with other protocols and other protocols and stuff. But it's that's the question. So I don't even care. So the market is there, right? If you have a public API, I don't care if it's open API or just REST or whatever. The market is there. With GraphQL, I think we'll just see the glimpse of what's possible to do with all those APIs that are already even public. And I agree with you that everyone is looking. I think everyone in that space is thinking about this crazy problem of let's call it the semantic web or whatever, but your point is the exact right that I said. Trust is the most important thing here, and if you have a track record of fucking up your users or changing licenses or all kinds of things like that, and they're worried already now, then do you really think that they would trust you to take over such an important thing? I think that's why trust is extremely important. And here, like you said, Git is a great example, and GraphQL being under the Linux Foundation is also a great guarantee for that. And again, we're not the only ones, right? There are JSON Schema, Open API foundations, like both of them are also under the Linux Foundation. Like there's a lot of force in open source, but yeah, I think this is the dream. And I think, again, like this is why somehow, I don't know why, but for many years, we gradually, all kinds of players build small things here and there, and gradually like open source more and more of the ecosystem. Now it feels like everything is finally coming together, like all of the vendors, all of the solutions, not only the energy, but actual solutions that people could use. The power of opening the ecosystem feels like it's just, everything is just kind of like got together for GraphQL. Like it's really, it's like, sounds a cliche, but it really feels like that. I mean, anyone that will be in GraphQL, I really think would get their minds blown about what's going to happen. Like really,
it's all falling into place, and I think it's so important what you said about trust. So trust, it takes years to build, and the easiest way to build it is with open source. But the second you destroy trust, it takes even longer to rebuild that trust. So great point. And exactly what you said, falling into steps, it's a great transition into GraphQL Comp. And so this will be our last topic, so we're at 5 minutes. So talk to me about GraphQL Comp. Like, I remember the Slack group maybe a year ago when it was just an idea. And then now it's this amazing thing that's happening next week, September 19th to 21st. Some of the best companies in the world, best GraphQL contributors. We have amazing talks everywhere from Netflix to Pinterest to the Guild to WunderGraph to Stele to GraphBase, everything. How did this happen, and why did it happen? And what are some, I guess, hints or secrets you can tell us to look forward to?
I think everyone has their story, I think, of how it happened, came to be. I think the main thing is that the community needed that. Like, we got to the point where we didn't have conference where you could really share ideas freely. That's the truth. Like, there were other conferences, but they were by certain vendors, and those were like basically blocking competitors or other ideas. So, if you wanted to just, let's say you want to, you're an architect or you're a developer in your company, and you just want to look at all the different solutions out there and compare and talk to each one of the vendors, it's like very basic. You didn't have a place to do that. Like, you had to go to this vendor's conference and that vendor conference. And of course, these vendors try to make those conferences look like it's just a GraphQL conference. It's like they're open for everyone. But if you look a bit deeper, like every sensible person immediately saw that, like, it's very directed into one single vendor. So I think there's just, people understood. People got like, okay, we need something like that. And I think so. That was the main reason. I think this year it finally happened. I think people understood that there's a need. There are so many companies that wanted to showcase, and once we got the idea going, it was very fast. And I mean, there's a lot of people to thank for creating this conference. But the main people of the conference committee in the GraphQL Foundation are the main people around that. Also, we worked with the events team of the Linux Foundation that were extremely professional, and all the process of, from picking the place, picking the talks, organizing, it's also an open process because it's under the Linux Foundation. So there's like, known processes. It's not like this random person chooses talks. It's just like, it's a process that is the same process like KubeCon, and like all the biggest conferences in the world are following. And I think it shows. Like, if you look at the schedule of the first official GraphQL Conf, it's insane. It's like the most interesting schedule you can think of, right? Like, there's every single talk is fascinating. I haven't seen any conference with a schedule like that. Like, every single talk is by, and by different people, and each one is extremely interesting. Like different subjects, different people. Workshops are insane. Like if you look at the workshop day, like I don't, it's just it just shows to me like that if you just open stuff for the ecosystem, the ecosystem comes and makes the best thing possible. There's no other way. And I think finally we got this, and this is why I think also so many things are being opened right now. I think it's yeah, I mean, I can't wait for your talk there, and I can wait for like Michael's for Chili Cream's talk there, and it's hard to. I mentioned there's going to be new front-end frameworks announced. We're the guild going to announce a couple of big things there. Hazura, Solo, like Postman, like there's so many people and posts there. Like it's, I mean, just people should go to the website. By the way, we build the website, so this is also cool. We worked hard on it. But like just go through the speakers, go through the schedule. It's I know I'm very happy, and I never expected the first conference to be so successful and so interesting. Yeah,
it's the start of something big, like for the end users, for the ecosystem.
Really like that.
Monopolies are not good, and as you were speaking, I just realized I should actually be getting paid by Apollo, because I'm Apollo's chief benchmark engineer, by tweeting about how we make WunderGraph faster. We kind of encouraged Apollo engineers to look at router and then investigate bugs and issues, and they found some performance improvements, and that's great for the ecosystem, and it shows that we need competition for innovation. Not having competition means we're blocking innovation. Closing down ecosystem means a worse experience, a worse product, less value for the market. So like I think the ultimate goal is to have healthy, respectful competition, and that's the ecosystem, the GraphQL ecosystem I want to create with all the others. So yeah, that's my last words here.
Well said.
Yeah, I feel like sorry.
No, go ahead, Yuri. Any closing words, and then I'll close this out.
Yeah, what I've said is I think the best. I really believe in capitalism, but like I think open source is the perfect capitalism, because it also basically like it means fierce competition for the user, but on the other hand, like the fact that it's open source means that like if one vendor is winning and they're open source, they're pushing up all their competition as well. So they're also that's the whole what I see right now. And yeah, and I think like what you said about something big is happening, it's exactly that. Like it feels like everything, like the floodgates is unblocked now. It feels like for us, at least from my perspective, everything is so easy now. There's a solution now for everything. I mean, people still don't know it, and that's why GraphQL Conf is great. So we'll get people to see everything that's out there. But GraphQL is becoming so easy to start, so easy to work with. There's so many solutions out there. There's so many options that anyone can choose. And the best thing is like just like you said, like we are learning from each other. Like we see everything you're doing, and you're seeing everything that we're doing. And and we also have benchmarks that we're going to open source soon. Like it's going to be a big announcement. But like, I mean, those benchmarks are great because we can compare to you and then improve and everything. And it's benchmarks are not freezing in time, right? It's like It's just like keeps us moving forward. And yeah.
Well said. Well said. Well, that concludes today's AMA with Uri. Thank you again so much. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. Remember, next week we have GraphQL Conf, so September 19th to 21st. You can probably reach out to the guild as well, but if you reach out to WunderGraph, we have a discount code that we can offer you if you guys reach out. So thank you guys again so much. Uri, we'll see you at the conf, but thanks again. Bye, guys.
Bye. Ciao. Thank you.